Good morning and happy Sunday. Hope everybody's having a relaxing and an enjoyable Sunday morning. We're continuing the reading of Allow Me to Introduce an Insider's Guide to the Occult, published by Weiser Books. And we are on the chapter which was my foreword to the 2016 edition of The Legend of Aleister Crowley. And this edition was the New Falcon Publications 2016. And here we go. It starts with an epigram, which is a quote from our dear family friend, Robert Patton. Robert, if you're listening, I know you're out there, but I don't know if you're listening this morning. In the old days, we used to call you, or call Bob, Mad Bob. I don't know if he still likes that, but it's an endearing appellation. And here's his quote. Look, it doesn't matter if Crowley was a Satanist. He was a good kind of Satanist, and you'll just love him. Trust me. You've probably heard things about Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947. Perhaps you've heard monstrous things, hideous things, terrifying things, disgusting and ghastly things. On the other hand, you might have heard wonderful things, funny things, astonishing things, inspiring things, even supernatural and sacred things. Anyone who thinks they know something about Crowley will most likely voice a very strong opinion, either unfavorable or favorable. Detractors are quick to vilify him as the devil himself, insane, perverse, and evil, while his admirers lionize him as a genius, an enlightened holy man, a saint, a Buddha, prophet of a new aeon. It's been nearly 70 years since Edward Alexander, Aleister Crowley, drew his last breath, and opinions about him remain as passionately polarized as they were in 1930, when the legend of Aleister Crowley was first published. As you'll learn in Dr. Regardie's fine introduction, penned in 1969, this slim little volume was originally written and compiled by Crowley's friend and publisher, P.R. Stevenson, to serve as a testament to and a showcase sampler of Crowley's extraordinary talents and contributions to the world of English literature and philosophy. The book was also an undisguised attempt to mount a rational defense of Crowley's character and reputation that had been mercilessly and irrationally attacked by the press since the turn of the century. Stevenson's efforts to redeem Crowley, however, would not be immediately or universally successful. It saddens me to say that today, 85 years after its initial publication, the world needs to read this book more than ever. The Legend of Aleister Crowley was my first real introduction to the personality and works of Aleister Crowley. I first read it at a pivotal season in my own life, shortly after our son was born in 1972. To say it was a watershed moment in my life would be a monumental understatement. I would go on to spend the better part of the next 40 years of my life studying Crowley, digesting his writings, meeting and learning from people who had known him when he was alive, and practicing his magical and meditation techniques and attempting to live the philosophy of life he so passionately espoused. However, my first few stumbling encounters with the works of the man who called himself the Beast 666 were awkward and comically terrifying. I was a 24-year-old failed yogi and a fledgling Western mystic poser, working my way through the monographs of the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, the traditional Martinist order, and the builders of the Adytum, or BOTA. I fancied myself a bit of a heretic and a spiritual rebel, but I certainly wanted nothing to do with anything that smacked of black magic or Satanism. Now I've got a footnote. At the time, I was an ignorant and superstitious young fool who had no idea that black magic and Satanism, as I fearfully imagined them to be, did not exist in objective reality. Today, while I do not call myself either a black magician or Satanist, or even care to use the term to describe what I believe or practice, I know quite a few brilliant, perfectly brilliant, and intellectual individuals who are quite comfortable identifying themselves as such. Everyone I've met is honest and sincere, and in my opinion, as liberated and possessed of high moral integrity as those who follow less colorful, exotic spiritual paths. That's the end of the footnote. Everything I read about Aleister Crowley up to that point was bad. My occult dictionary listed him as a black magician who ate human flesh and sacrificed 120 babies one year. My blue-haired Rosicrucian elders told me he was the devil himself. My fellow Martinists cautioned me not to even utter his name. My tarot-loving friends in BOTA warned me that his teachings were sexually perverse and that he advocated performing grotesque and unnatural sexual acts on tarot cards. But for some curious reason, the more my mystical colleagues tried to dissuade me, the more fascinated I became. Who was this guy? I've written elsewhere that I bought a deck of his Thoth tarot cards and hysterically gave them away, then took them back after talking with Mad Bob, who is our family friend and spiritual mentor, who soundly upbraided me for my display of spiritual cowardice. Crowley was cool. He was a genius and a holy man. If you're really serious about mastering magic and the Hermetic arts, you're going to have to dig deep into what this guy's about. But everyone says he was a Satanist. Was he a Satanist? I asked Bob. No, he wasn't a Satanist. Then he paused. Well, yes, I guess you could say he was. Then he disagreed with himself once more. No, not really. Finally, he said, look, it doesn't matter if Crowley was a Satanist. He was a good kind of Satanist, and you'll just love him. Trust me. I took Bob at his word, and soon after our curious conversation, I had the opportunity to read Crowley's Book of Thoth, the work that was written late in his life to accompany the Thoth tarot cards. I felt like a grammar school student trying to read postgraduate papers on magic, philosophy, alchemy, Kabbalah, astrology, and comparative religion. Even though I understood only a fraction of what I read, I found Crowley to be brilliant, funny, and someone who obviously mastered the spiritual arts of which he wrote so passionately. Furthermore, it became breathtakingly evident that Crowley had actually achieved the expanded levels of consciousness his magical practices and meditations were designed to trigger. Crowley was the real deal. I thought. And if that means he was a Satanist, then he was a good kind of Satanist, and I just loved him. The Book of Thoth and the Thoth Tarot cards, however, provided precious little information about who Crowley was, what his background was, why he was so admired and hated. I wanted to know more. At the time, books by and about Crowley were very rare if they existed at all. One afternoon in Laguna Beach, at a bookstore, a beautiful black cat named Catalina guided me to an odd little book that would provide me a clearer picture of Crowley the man, the poet, and the philosopher. "Any books by Aleister Crowley?" I asked the owner. She looked at me as if I asked her for a book about baby torture, and answered that she didn't think she had any Crowley, but pointed to the cat sleeping serenely on the second shelf of the bookcase in the adjacent room. "If I have anything, it'll be on the shelf behind Catalina. That is, if you can get her to move." Sure enough, peeking just behind the somewhat obese feline that was what appeared to be a damaged, paper-bound edition of The Legend of Aleister Crowley. It didn't look at all impressive or scary. In fact, it looked rather shoddily produced. The cover almost bare of adornment or color, with only a simple graphic of an eye in the triangle. And that's a photograph of my copy of that book. Doesn't that look funky? The legend, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," it says at the top, all in caps. The Legend of Aleister Crowley by P.R. Stevenson and Israel Regardie. Prophet of a new aeon, vilified as the most evil man in the world. Who and what is Aleister Crowley that he should be the original of a legend of infamy without parallel in the modern world? Here is the evidence of a campaign of personal vilification unparalleled in literary history. Here, too, is Crowley himself, through his own words, his books, and his life. All of that was on the cover. And down at the bottom it said, "Love is the law, love under will," all in caps. I have to confess the titillating language of the crudely printed blurbs on the cover intrigued me no end. I stroked Catalina and thanked her, then immediately purchased the book from the shocked proprietor and rushed home to read it. I was especially impressed with the introduction by Israel Regardie. I recognized the name because I'd already read his classic text, The Tree of Life, as part of my self-guided efforts to learn the Kabbalah. He had been Crowley's secretary in the late 1920s and lived with him in France and Germany during an especially colorful period in Crowley's life. Crowley was just a couple of years older than I. Regardie was just a couple of years older than my own father. Excuse me. And so, in my eyes, represented a generational link between Crowley and me. His frank contemporary writing style was pleasantly palatable and served to lift the verbose, intimidating, larger-than-life Crowley out of the fog of superstitious mythology and placed him in the clear objective light of psychology and philosophy. Knowing that this respected and august author thought so highly of Crowley was very reassuring. And the fact that he put his seal of approval on this little book profoundly elevated its importance in my estimation. The signature line of Regardie's introduction revealed that he lived in Studio City. California, just a little over 50 miles from Costa Mesa, where I lived. Suddenly, the vaporous fantasies of magical history and legend crystallized into the objective space-time coordinates of my own backyard. Perhaps I could actually meet this guy someday, I thought. Indeed, the gods soon conspired to make this fantasy a reality. In less than 2 years, I found myself sitting in Regardie's living room in Studio City, sipping champagne cocktails and discussing magic and Aleister Crowley with my magical neighbor hero. Regardie and I remained friends until his death in 1985. I don't have to remind the reader that in 1972, or that 1972 was a long time ago, and that the world has changed dramatically in the last 35 years. Crowley's reputation, if not totally redeemed, has undergone a fairer, more balanced evaluation in the court of public opinion, at least among the educated and well-informed. Books by Crowley and about Crowley are abundant and readily available around the world and in many languages. His teachings in occult organizations flourish worldwide, and his contributions to modern art, literature, and philosophy are increasingly acknowledged and recognized. In 2002, the BBC aired a television documentary, Great Britons, based on a poll of that the network conducted to learn who the British people considered the top 100 greatest British people in history. There, in 73rd place, nestled comfortably between King Henry V of Shakespeare fame and Robert the Bruce of Mel Gibbons' Braveheart fame, was occultist, ceremonial magician, poet, painter, novelist, and mountaineer Aleister Crowley. I'll close these introductory words by heartily encouraging the reader to make the effort if he or she wishes to learn more about Crowley. For me, my labor these last 40 years has been well repaid, and my life, my consciousness, and I dare say my spiritual happiness has been enriched by the life, the teachings, the magic, and the extraordinary legend of Aleister Crowley. I encourage anyone wishing a more thorough and scholarly comment on the legend of Aleister Crowley to also obtain and read Mr. Stephen King's excellent 2007 edition published by Helios Books, and to also avail themselves of Israel Regardie's own biography of Crowley, The Eye in the Triangle. And that's the end of that introduction. And oddly enough, my next introduction will be to The Eye in the Triangle, which we'll do tomorrow morning. And that's Monday, June 15th, which just happens to be the 53rd anniversary of Constance and I living together. We started living together on June 15th, 1967, and we finally got officially married on November 9th of that same year. Just sharing that with you. Tomorrow, I'll see you tomorrow on my anniversary. I'm glad I reminded you because it'll remind me. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under the will. Bye.